On September 3rd, 2006, Subhash and his 9 friends went on a boys' trip to Guna Caves in a small hill station of India. But little did they know that the place, ominously known as Devil's Kitchen, would turn their fun trip into a nightmare. It was a wedding party in a remote village in India. People gathered for the occasion, filling the place with laughter and joy. Among the guests was Prasad, a driver who also ran his own car rental business. At the party, he bumped into his old friend Sudhi, who was his long-lost school friend. Sudhi introduced Prasad to his other 10 friends, known in their area as the Manjummel Boys. This local gang of boys from the village of Manjummel was having a great time at the wedding. While chatting with Sudhi, Prasad learned that the group wanted to go on a small road trip the following week. Hearing this, Prasad offered to drive them and shared his business card. Just then, another gang from the same village crashed the party, leading to a brawl over group supremacy. They were all drunk and tensions ran high. Kutan, one of the Manjummel boys and the wisest of them all, suggested ending the fight with a tug-of-war match, as their group was good at it. Unfortunately, the other team won, leaving Kutan upset. The next day, the boys met at their clubhouse to plan their trip. Initially, they thought of going to Goa, but due to budget constraints, they decided on Kodaikanal, a beautiful hill station close by. As planned, Sudhi called Prasad to accompany them and drive them to Kodaikanal. While picking up their friends, they learned that Subhas, one of their buddies, was unwilling to go because he was low on cash. Kutan assured him that money wasn't an issue, which made Subhas smile, knowing his friends always had his back. Cherishing this moment, Kutan sought permission from Subhas's mother before they left, promising to protect her son on the trip. Asian parents are always lovingly protective of their children, and this gesture reassured her. Kodaikanal is a beautiful hill station in southern India, draped in clouds, green hills, and amazing caves. The boys had a blast throughout the trip, visiting different locations and making unforgettable memories. They hiked through lush trails, took boat rides on serene lakes, and enjoyed the local cuisine, their bond growing even stronger with each passing moment. Before leaving, Sudhi suggested they visit Guna Caves in Kodaikanal. These infamous caves got their name Guna after a popular movie was shot there. Before that, they were called Devil's Kitchen. High and happy, the friends reached Guna Caves and decided to explore. Prasad did not accompany them for this short tour, as he wanted to rest since he would have to stay up all night to drive them back home. So, he stayed back in the car while the rest moved along, excited to explore. One important thing about these caves is that they are infamous for their deep holes. If you slip, there's no chance of coming back alive, and finding your remains is almost impossible. So, some parts of the cave are sealed off. Boys being boys, they decided to explore the restricted areas despite a warning from Dominic, a tourist guide. Though there were signs of lurking danger, the friends ventured further. Deep into the caves, a few friends decided to write their group name, Manjummel Boys, on the rocks within the cave walls to make this trip even more memorable and show their bond. After writing it on the wall, they called out to the others, who were exploring other sides, to regroup and take a picture. While coming from the other side of the cave, Subhas fell into a covered hole in the ground. Initially, everyone assumed he was pulling a prank, but panic set in because he did not respond, after calling out to him multiple times. As the day grew darker, the eeriness of the situation engulfed the friends. They kept shouting at the top of their voices, but there was no response. Instead, a flock of bats flew out of the cave. Seeing this from afar, Dominic realized something had happened in the restricted area and rushed to see what the matter was. After the initial shock, a few of them ran back to get help while others stayed and continued calling out to Subhas, hoping he would respond. They informed the locals and Dominic about what had happened and begged for help. Dominic told them that the specific area was off limits for a reason. So far, 13 people had fallen into that hole, and none have ever recovered, dead or alive. The British had called Guna Caves the Devil's Kitchen due to this reason, and that particular hole was over 900 feet deep. By now, Dominic said, Subhas was likely dead. The boys were heartbroken, but still hopeful. No one understood the boys' plight, as no one came forward to help. They begged for assistance, but the locals believed that the devil would catch and cook them once someone fell into the cave. Ignoring this superstition, they went to seek the forest officer in charge of the area. Unfortunately, he was nowhere to be found. A shopkeeper suggested informing the police and firemen. The boys hurried to the parking lot where Prasad was chilling, unaware of the incident. They explained the whole situation to him. Hearing this, Prasad immediately took them to the police station. Meanwhile, back at the cave, clouds gathered atop the peak, and it started to rain within minutes. His friends were still planning to rescue Subhas. At the police station, the friends, now even more scared, were beaten by the police. Instead, the police filed a complaint against them for entering a restricted area and accused them of murdering Subhas and filing false complaints. The police were reluctant to listen to their pleas, knowing this was an open and shut case with little hope of a positive outcome. Meanwhile, rain started to flood the hole. To prevent water from making it even harder for Subhas to survive, Kutan and others lay in front of the hole to stop the rainwater from going inside. There was still no sign of life, but they believed he was alive and would return to them. If you think your friends have done enough, think twice. Back at the police station, after much convincing and fearing backlash from the local people for failing to help, the boys finally persuaded one of the police officers to go with them to the cave. On the way, the officer informed them that the last person who fell into the hole was the former minister's nephew around 10 years ago, and despite all efforts, no one had been able to rescue him. By then, the forest officer had also arrived. By the time they reached, the rain had stopped. After inspecting the hole, the police officer suggested leaving Subhas, believing he was no longer alive. But the friends were adamant about rescuing him and started calling Subhas's name at the top of their voices. Soon, Sixen heard Subhas's cries and informed the others that he was alive. The police were convinced to try to save him. The locals and the police were shocked to hear that Subhas was still alive. Maybe it was because he had friends who didn't believe in giving up. The police called the fire department and more officers to start the rescue work. They estimated that Subhas had fallen about 120 feet. The plunge wasn't straight and had many rocky curves. They tried lowering a rope for Subhas to hold, but doubted he could grab it after such a fall. Even the rescue team was scared to go inside the cave hole. It was like walking into the jaws of death. There was pin-drop silence when the question of who would go inside the cave came up. It felt like the mission might be abandoned. But the bonds of friendship were strong, and Kutan decided he would go down and find his friend. He had promised Subhas's mother to take care of him and bring him back safely. The police were initially reluctant since Kutan had no formal training, but they finally agreed after being convinced by friends and locals. The rescue team instructed Kutan on how to tie Subhas to pull him up. It was a lot to take in at once, but Kutan was determined. They lowered him into the hole. Along the way, the rope ran out. The police were worried it was unsafe to go lower due to low oxygen levels, and didn't want to risk Kutan's life. The hole was narrow, making Kutan more claustrophobic, but he didn't give up. It was a nightmare, but he could hear Subhas's voice clearly and knew he couldn't leave him. The police arranged for more rope and lowered Kutan further. At 120 feet, Kutan saw Subhas, barely hanging on a ledge, covered in blood and muddy water from the rain. Kutan hurriedly tied Subhas and, without wasting time, asked the team to pull them up. While pulling them up, the wet and muddy ground caused the rescue team to slip. The weight was too much. As soon as the boys saw this, they all jumped in and grabbed the rope, pulling it up just like in their tug of war. They might not have won the game back in their village, but they won the game in real life. After receiving first aid at the nearest clinic, they took Subhas to a hospital in their hometown, where he was treated more thoroughly for multiple fractures. They decided not to tell anyone about the incident and told Subhas's family he fell at a waterfall. Subhas suffered trauma from the fall and had trouble sleeping initially, but slowly started recovering with trauma therapy. Later, the news of Kutan saving Subhas came out in public, and Kutan was applauded for his bravery. 2 years later, Kutan was awarded by the government for his selfless act,